Hi and welcome to Film 3.uk Movie Recap. Today, we will be reviewing the movie It's a Wonderful Life 1946, so if you're a fan of the film or just curious about it, stick around. In our video reviews, we may include some spoilers, so please be careful if you haven't seen the movie yet. The first part of It's a Wonderful Life takes place on Christmas Eve, 1945. George Bailey is preparing to leave his small town of Bedford Falls to travel to New York City. However, he is stopped by his uncle Billy, who asks him to take over the family business for a week while he goes on vacation. George reluctantly agrees, and Billy leaves for his trip. That evening, George goes to his favorite bar, Marty's, for a drink. There, he meets his old friend, Clarence Odebody, who is now an angel. Clarence has been sent to help George, who is facing difficult times. George tells Clarence about his problems. He is stuck in a dead-end job, he has a pregnant wife at home, and he has been struggling to make ends meet. Clarence listens sympathetically, and then offers to show George what life would have been like if he had never been born. At first, George is reluctant to see this alternate reality, but he eventually agrees. Clarence takes him to Bedford Falls on the night of his birth, December 5, 1919. There, they watch as George's father saves the life of a young boy, Harry Bailey. George is moved by what he sees and decides to return home. As he and Clarence walk back to the bar, they hear a commotion inside. They discover that Uncle Billy has lost the $8,000 that was meant to be deposited at the bank, and George is now facing financial ruin. George Bailey is feeling low and frustrated on Christmas Eve. His family is gathered around the supper table, but his mind is elsewhere. He's thinking about all of the things he wishes he could have done with his life, like traveling the world, going to college, and having exciting adventures. Meanwhile, his wife Mary is trying to cheer him up and their kids are playing with their food. George gets up from the table and goes outside to blow off some steam. He looks up at the stars and wonders what life would be like if he had never been born. Suddenly, an angel named Clarence appears and grants George's wish. He shows him what the world would be like if he had never existed. George is appalled by what he sees. His hometown of Bedford Falls has become a slum called Pottersville and his friends and family are all leading miserable lives. George realizes that even though his life may not be perfect, it's still worth living. He decides to go back to his own time and make the most of what he has. George is despondent after his business partner, Henry F. Potter, threatens to take over the building and loan. George's uncle, Billy, tries to cheer him up with a Christmas Eve story about a man who wished he had never been born. The story resonates with George, who wishes he had never been born himself. George's guardian angel, Clarence E., grants his wish and shows him what life would have been like had he not been born. George learns that his act of self-sacrifice, leaping into an icy river to save his brother, Harry, has had a ripple effect on the lives of everyone he knows. Without George, his hometown of Bedford Falls would have become a blighted slum controlled by Potter. Clarence convinces George that his life has been, and always will be, wonderful. The fourth part of the film begins with George and his family moving into their new home. George is happy to be out of his old apartment and is excited to start his new life. However, he soon realizes that his new home is in a very run-down neighborhood. George starts to feel sorry for himself and wonders if he made the right decision in moving. George has just been saved from suicide by his guardian angel, Clarence. George is now able to see what life would have been like for his loved ones if he had never been born. George sees that his wife, Mary, would have married someone else and that his brother, Harry, would have been killed in World War II. George is also able to see that his parents would have been forced to move out of their home if he had not been there to help them. In the sixth part of It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is struggling to keep his business afloat and ends up taking a loan from Mr. Potter. George's wife, Mary, is pregnant and they are trying to save up enough money to buy a house. George is feeling the pressure and is struggling to keep up with the demands of his job. Things come to a head when George gets into an argument with his boss and quits his job. George then goes to the local bar where he runs into his old friend, Bert. George tells Bert about his troubles and Bert offers to help him. George is hesitant at first, but then agrees to let Bert help him. George Bailey is in despair and wishes he had never been born. His prayers are answered by his guardian angel, Clarence, who shows him what life in his hometown of Bedford Falls would have been like if he had never existed. Clarence shows George that his family, friends, and community would all be worse off without him. George realizes that even though his life has been difficult, he has made a difference and has been a good person. He returns home to his loving wife, Mary, and their children. In the eighth part of It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is struggling to keep his family afloat after his father's death and the loss of the family's life savings. He is forced to take a job at the local bank, where he is constantly berated by his boss, Mr. Potter. When George's uncle dies, George is left with no choice but to take over the family business. He is quickly overwhelmed by the responsibility and starts to wish he had never been born. However, George's wife, Mary, and their children help him through his tough times and remind him of the wonderful life he has. George Bailey is struggling to keep his business, the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan, afloat after his uncle, Billy, loses $8,000 that was supposed to go to the bank. George's wife, Mary, tries to encourage him, but he is so despondent that he contemplates suicide. However, he is interrupted by his guardian angel, Clarence Odebody, who has been sent to help George. Clarence shows George what life would have been like if he had never been born, and George is shocked to see that his family and friends would have been much worse off without him. He also realizes that his own life has been much richer than he ever realized. In the end, George decides to return to his life and tries to make the best of it, even though things are still tough. He is finally able to see all the good that he has done, and the happy future that awaits him. George Bailey has just been saved from suicide by his guardian angel, Clarence. He is now able to see what life would have been like if he had never been born. In the 10th part of the film, George realizes that even though his life has been difficult, it has also been wonderful. He is able to see all the lives he has touched and how different they would be without him. George is also able to see his own family and how much they love him. This experience has changed George and he is now able to appreciate his life more than ever before. If you found the review enjoyable and wish to watch the movie, we've provided a link in the description where you can access it. If you appreciated the review, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Till the next time, bye.